Anyway, by the rules of a romance fantasy, she ended up possessing a novel. Anyway, even if she returned, she would just get beaten down again. Anyway, she was the heroine. Anyway, so that she could have a happy ending in this life, she proposed a contract marriage to the Grand Duke of the North. But how could life ever be that easy? The man she proposed the contract marriage to thought he should at least hear her reasons first, so he received her as a guest. Before he regrets it, I should hurry back. This contract marriage seemed doomed from the very beginning. She entered this novel entirely because of a god's mistake. To make up for dragging her into it, the god promised to grant any one wish she wanted. She kept putting off deciding on her wish, and in the end, she delayed so long that she forgot. Still, she felt there was nothing much to regret anyway. Using knowledge from her original world, her understanding of the story, and a little bit of luck, she rose to the highest position. Besides, the most handsome male lead in the story was right by her side. Based on that alone, she should definitely have had a perfect ending in the novel. But how could she keep living as the protagonist even after the ending? It was a brutally difficult task, disobedient nobles, and a male lead who was far too obsessed with her. In the end, she simply threw him out with a single divorce paper. It was nothing but the continuation of suffering. How could there not be even one person who could help her in life? Your Majesty, a letter has arrived. She had intended to burn it immediately, but when she heard it was from Duke Chevalier, she took it back. This elegant handwriting really was just as beautiful as ever. The Grand Duke, Peruse, who ruled the Northern Chevalier territory. Other nobles looked down on him and called him the Beast Grand Duke, but to her, he was a very important friend. Even though they had never actually met, he was the only person she could truly talk to. So yes, he counted as a friend. At first, the letters continued out of courtesy when she ascended the throne. Thanks to the Grand Duke staying out of the war over succession, she was able to take the throne in peace. That first letter was also meant to express a little of her gratitude. And in his reply, there were warm, encouraging words. From then on, she gradually became closer to the Grand Duke through their exchanged letters. She was not a brave person. After gaining such status, she often feared whether she was doing well in every way. He was the one who gave her courage. Before she knew it, 5 years had passed. She had thought they might meet once, but he still refused. The Chevalier family had once been part of the former emperor's faction, the same emperor she had overthrown. If she met the Grand Duke, then regardless of their personal friendship, it would become a political focal point. Still, no matter how you looked at it, how could they never meet even once? No matter what others said, it could not truly hurt her. What would the Grand Duke look like? This was a romance fantasy world. After all, his handwriting was so elegant. So surely he must be incredibly handsome too. Judging by the letters he usually sent, his personality seemed good too. If only she really could meet him once. Or should she just shock him with an imperial decree? This is an imperial decree. If you dare disobey, no, on second thought, better not. She said that when they were no longer Emperor and Grand Duke, they could meet under different identities. The moment you start using commands between friends, that friendship is over. The friendship they had built over 5 years would vanish in an instant. She slowly walked to the window. An emperor who could not even freely meet a friend. Should she just quit altogether? If she did that, the world would fall into chaos when she returned, wouldn't it? Wait, while she was talking just now, it sounded like she heard some strange noise. A man in black appeared behind her. He muttered that if he couldn't have it, he would destroy it. He actually said a line, so cliché, even third-rate thugs would not use it anymore. If she had known her ending would be this absurdly empty, she would have gone to meet the Grand Duke no matter what. That bastard god who dragged her into this world revived her again. This time, she would definitely live happily, and the god truly heard her wish. She was given another chance to live happily and meet the Grand Duke she had longed for. She came here using a contract marriage as an excuse. But how could life ever be that easy? Grand Duke Peruse told her to hurry back before he regretted it. Her fantasy shattered in an instant. Seriously, who exactly had been lying to her? That murderous gaze, the thick beard, and the huge scar covering his face. Why had the art style changed so suddenly? This was supposed to be romance fantasy. In a romance fantasy story, even a male lead's father would not have a beard on his face. After thinking it over, she still decided to go in and speak with him. He agreed, but the heroine still found him terrifying. In less than a minute, Litram Miltro's composure was already slipping. After going inside, she discovered how desolate this place was. This castle clearly had not had visitors in a very long time. The surroundings were gloomy too. The inner castle felt sinister, and even the way the people in the castle looked at her was frightening. There were even rows of eerie, intimidating nights. "This way, please." He asked her directly why she wanted a contract marriage. She had another important reason for coming here. She wanted to become one of the people of the North. That's right, she wanted a contract marriage. Besides wanting to meet the Grand Duke, there was another reason. She wanted nothing to do with the imperial family. In the original story, the imperial family created trials to spur the protagonist's growth. Put simply, it was corrupt. A breeding ground for corruption and all kinds of factions. The troubles imperial nobles were bound to face were a headache. In a situation this miserable, rather than making her go through all that, she would rather take the college entrance exam again. She had only managed to rise to the ruler's position because of all that terrifying knowledge. In the original story, she had been the daughter of a fallen baron. And the reason she became emperor was because the crown prince, the male lead of the original story, handed power over to her. She had truly been grateful to him then. So for her, there was no choice except the North. The territory ruled by Duke Peru's Chevalier, who was estranged from the imperial family, was the most advantageous place, one where she would not be affected by the imperial family. She also told him that she wanted his protection. But in the Grand Duke's eyes, this would bring her far more harm than good. Leaving aside the bitter cold and harsh conditions of the North, magical beasts appeared regularly. It was extremely dangerous. The beast Grand Duke of the North, even if he carried imperial blood, he was still a barbarian who had cast away noble refinement. Getting entangled with him was not a good thing. He said that even if it were only a marriage on paper, it would bring her nothing but harm. Thinking back, he had often been like this. The Grand Duke behind the letters was kind and gentle, and at times inclined to belittle himself. To her former self as well, when she had wanted to explain things to him, he had spoken in exactly the same way. She finally understood why the first thing he said upon meeting her was that she could still go back before it was too late. Yes, deep down she was hurt. Though he looked different from what she had imagined, the man before her really was Peruse. In the swamp of fierce politics and endless lies where she had struggled, he had remained unchanged from beginning to end. The one important friend who made her feel at ease. She had no reason to back away. So she told him directly that this was advantageous for her. After all, magical beasts existed here, so the imperial family would not dare come close. Here the heroine told him not to belittle himself so much. She had come here precisely to meet someone like him. So at the very least, in this life, she wanted to see it through. If he thought he was losing out, then let them become friends. In this life, she did not want regrets. The Grand Duke was shocked. Even seeing his appearance, she could still say such things. She cleared her throat and said that yes, he was a little frightening, but he was not forcing her, and a marriage on paper would not be a problem. In truth, the reason the Grand Duke had invited her over was the letters on his desk. The heroine was stunned on the spot. Why was her letter here? The day before the letter proposing the contract marriage arrived, he had refused an invitation from the emperor to attend a banquet. He had no interest at all in struggles over the throne, so why did they keep dragging him into it? Then suddenly, light appeared in his drawer. What kind of monster would want to speak with someone whom all the nobles shunned? He had not expected it to be a whole drawer full of letters. So he said those letters had appeared out of nowhere. As unbelievable as it sounded, that was indeed the truth. That God, honestly, rather than doing something like this, it would have been better to revive the Grand Duke too. Even so, the Grand Duke was still worried about her feelings, afraid she might be frightened. The heroine said she was fine, just a little startled and flustered. Peruse said he was not trying to investigate her. He only wanted to confirm that the person with whom he had exchanged letters for 5 years was really her. And so he told her everything that had happened. He hoped she could somehow believe in those letters. He had already called Priest Honore to verify them. Even Priest Honore had never seen such aggressive divine power before. The priest said this was an arrangement bestowed upon the Grand Duke by the gods, and that the letters must be carefully preserved. Among the many letters that had come from the future, the person called Litram Miltro had treated him like a true friend. Their relationship held no political interest at all. It was simply the most ordinary kind of friendship. But why would the gods show him these letters? What was the point of foretelling that he would have such a wonderful friend in the future? After that, he received a letter from Miltro Baronhouse, sent by someone named Litram Miltro. What was going on? It made no sense. Their letters were supposed to begin only 2 years later. And yet this letter was a proposal for a contract marriage. It was the first marriage proposal he had ever received. At first, he had only wanted to return the letter. He had assumed she would treat him like a madman and then simply forget about him. But now he would accept her proposal. In the previous life, he should have received news of Litram Miltro's death at the same time. He must have regretted it so painfully it cut into his bones. So this time, he would do what he wanted and leave no regrets. As for how to address her, the Grand Duke actually paused and thought, then wanted to call her my lady. The heroine said sternly that he should just call her by name. Their marriage contract was made. Once she had this, her surname would have to change. It was only a marriage on paper, so there was no need for a wedding or anything. Later, if Peruse came to like someone else, she would divorce him. That had not happened before her revival, but who knew what life might bring? The Grand Duke did not think such a thing would happen, and first took her to meet the attendants. From now on, she could freely give them orders. The attendants were Joachim and the maid Nicole. After seeing them, the heroine realized they were the same people who had been staring at her so ominously. To her surprise, after exchanging a few words, the two of them opposed the marriage and wanted to send her away. Both the heroine and the Grand Duke were stunned. It was the first time she had ever seen someone do this right to his face. They looked filled with pity and contempt for the Grand Duke. This young lady is far too good for him, even though they nagged him every day to get married. If he was going to marry so suddenly like this, then at the very least, he should have gotten to know the lady first. The maid even told her that if she wanted to run away, she should tell them, and they would do everything they could to help. The heroine realized they had probably misunderstood something. In truth, she was the one who proposed the marriage first. The Grand Duke became a little flustered when he heard that. He felt saying it like that might lead to misunderstandings, and they really were full of doubts. Ordinary nobles did not even want to meet the Grand Duke's eyes. Who would have thought a day like this would come? Once they learned the young lady was acting of her own free will, they said no more and withdrew. When they returned to the room, the Grand Duke explained things to her. The heroine said it was fine. If the others came to know that he was someone worthy of being loved, that would be a good thing too. But she still had not told him about the ending. Letting them continue misunderstanding things like this would burden him no matter what. In truth, she was a coward. She had no intention of falling in love with anyone again. A relationship that had started so sweetly had ended twisted and ruined. But this was not about fear. She did not want him to be treated like someone no one could love, nor to be wronged by others. And if people were afraid just from seeing his face, then they were the ones at fault too. Anyway, she wanted to shatter the fixed ideas surrounding him and become an important friend to him. So really, she still ought to find him a companion. But he felt certain he would never have a lover. Even if they had come together because of a contract and both promised that theirs was a relationship of friendship, he believed that if they were joined under the name of marriage, then some degree of loyalty was required. What a fool, dense as wood. Back when she overthrew the emperor, there had been people urging him to raise troops and rebel. If he wanted, he could have become emperor himself. But Peruse not only captured their agents, he wiped them all out instead. Just as she was preparing to reward him, a letter arrived saying he had only done what he ought to do. He needed no reward. If he had to choose something, he hoped that, as his pen pal, she would continue corresponding with him. The man who had said that back then now hoped they could continue this bond. He truly was the same as ever. It was because she knew he was this kind of person that she chose to meet him. If it was this person, then no matter what things became, as long as she could stay by his side, she would feel happy. So let them do their best together. This was the coldest place in the Empire. Wasn't he cold too? He was actually sleeping without even covering himself with a blanket. There was only one fireplace as well. Hearing her voice, the Grand Duke draped another layer of clothing over her. The Grand Duke had forgotten that she came from the south, and even bundled up like a ball, she still felt cold. Then she thought of a solution: borrow his body heat. When she really hugged him, the Grand Duke became very embarrassed, but she did feel warmth from him. It felt as if a big bear were holding her. It made her feel very safe. Soon, she fell fast asleep. This was something the Grand Duke had never even dared imagine. He should not have trusted anyone, but he was willing to trust her once. That person believed in him, and she had been revived once again. Even in her dreams, she kept saying that she did not want to die. He understood that it was probably a nightmare. Abido, the current crown prince, had a very complicated relationship with her, and Litra had been the protagonist in the original story. Naturally, Litra coming to the north would change the future. He would watch closely. Though she was half asleep, even if this was only an emergency measure, it would at least let her sleep peacefully through the night. The next day, when she woke up, the heroine apologized to him. After all, she had disturbed the Grand Duke's rest. He said it did not matter. In the past, he had spent nearly a month listening to the roars of magical beasts. The heroine wanted to say that next time she would just bite a towel, but when the Grand Duke compared it to biting down while treating a wound, she decided to drop it. It was best not to get hurt. The Grand Duke actually even said that between friends, getting a few injuries did not matter. Even so, he really was willing to hand over his property to her. After all, since she had even been emperor before, then surely being a duchess would also suit her well. The heroine grew angry upon hearing that. He really was too easy to take advantage of. Did he want his whole house ruined? Excuse me, your grace, breakfast is ready. Now the misunderstanding had only deepened. On the way out to eat, she wanted to ask him something. Could she use his office? She wanted to earn a little spending money. That was the most basic quality of a reborn person, grabbing profitable ventures first. But even after living 3 lives, she was still working. Still, the more money you had, the more comfortable life became. That was an eternal truth, so there was no helping it. Working in Peruse's office actually did not seem bad. When she wrote letters to him, she must have sat here all the time. This was her first time in this castle, yet she no longer felt fear or tension. The feeling that she could stay here safely and peacefully at ease. Her biggest business venture had already begun before she came here. Now, she only needed to attend to a few small matters. At that moment, she asked the butler if he knew where Peruse was. She had something to give him. The butler led her there. At this hour, he should be in the armory checking the equipment. But when the door opened, the Duke was not wearing anything on his upper body. She had something she wanted to give Peruse. It was a deed to land. In her previous life, it had been the piece of land she had wanted most. Not because she had urgently needed it, but because she had once kept saying she wanted it. She had not known the land would increase in value so quickly. If she had known, she would have bought it first. If that had happened, they would have had even more gifts to give to precious people. Judging by the documents, it looked like a very ordinary mountain. She intended to develop a project there later, mining diamonds and the like. When the Duke heard that, he told her to take it back. Wasn't it too precious to just give it to him? The heroine told him to think of it as a dowry. The Duke was greatly troubled. She had originally meant it as a gift for him. The heroine asked, was he planning to reject her gift? She had gone to great trouble to buy it back. It really would make her sad. After hearing that, the Grand Duke could only accept it. If it had come to this, then it seemed he had no choice but to find a proper bride price. Jacquem, who had been completely forgotten by the two of them, wondered whether he ought to give them some privacy. Very well, he should report it to the Grand Duke. But right now, the Grand Duke was in a low-pressure mood because those magical beasts had stopped him from preparing a betrothal gift. The Grand Duke asked her what she wanted. The heroine said there was no need to specially give her anything in return for that land deed, and he did not need to take it so seriously. Even though he asked her a few more times after that, she only said there was no need. He still wanted to give her at least a small gift, but she was too good at taking care of herself, and every chance slipped by. Later, when he finally said it to her in person, couldn't she at least accept something from him? She said that in her previous life, she had already received so much from Peruse. It truly was fine. She really had received a great deal from him in her previous life. Small gifts were the least of it. Once, when she needed a territory developed, he directly turned it into her private domain. He had never accepted her thanks in the slightest, saying that being grateful in her heart was enough. Now, their positions were completely reversed. It felt a little like revenge, and she found the Grand Duke's flustered helplessness unbearably cute. Just as the Grand Duke was about to say something, someone burst through the door shouting that something terrible had happened. The number of magical beasts had suddenly increased. If they were not subjugated at once, the homes of the residents would be in danger. Why was there not a single thing he could accomplish properly? What could he possibly say to that person? Simply standing beside her was nowhere near enough. The knights felt the Grand Duke's pressure growing lower and lower. He decided this could not continue. The second division would investigate the northern cave. The first division would move with him. The moment they found magical beasts, they were to report immediately. As soon as he finished speaking, he was ambushed. And yet the Grand Duke's main concern now was whether the magical beast's fur would match pink. The others gave meaningful smiles and said it would suit her. Hearing that, the Grand Duke revealed a dark smile. The magical beasts were doomed. After the heroine returned, she received a beautiful pelt. She heard it had been hunted especially for her. She tried it and asked if it suited her. The Grand Duke felt that it suited her far too well. He said he would go catch another 100. The heroine stopped him, saying she did not need that many. Anyway, she would treasure it dearly. He had worked hard enough already. The Grand Duke still felt a bit regretful. Ever since Lady Litra arrived, his grace had become much gentler overall. The Chevalier Grand Duke's house, a branch family of the imperial line, had not held important power within the imperial family, so they were sent to deal with the magical beasts of the north and other military matters. In the end, only one young boy remained alive. All the others were killed. Although, after great hardship, that boy managed to free himself from the imperial family's control. During that time, he often avoided others and developed a withdrawn, prickly temperament. That was why he came to be called the Beast Grand Duke. But to her, his personality was not withdrawn at all. Rather, he was kind and gentlemanly. It was simply that the Grand Duke was only like that toward her. He had originally hated noble socializing so much that every guest who came was knocked unconscious and sent back. 5 nobles had already been packed up and shipped home. So everyone begged her to take care of the Grand Duke. They were all hoping he could find happiness. Though everyone gossiped, he was the most important person in the north. If his misfortune could ease even a little, it would benefit those under him as well. She could hardly imagine it. In her previous life, and in this one, the side of Peruse he had always shown her was his gentle one. She had originally thought that was simply his true nature. I am Kenneth from the 1st Division of the Chevalier Knights, and I came to pay my respects. Thanks to you, my lady, his grace has changed a great deal. He looks especially happy these days. He also hoped the Grand Duke could remain that happy forever. Just like what Nicole had said, how lonely a life had the Grand Duke been living. Now she understood why Peruse belittled himself so much. A person who is not rich in heart will surely think they have many shortcomings. If that was so, then from now on, she would have to work even harder. She did not want to make someone precious to her unhappy. The Grand Duke came looking for Litra, but when he saw how happily they were talking, he could not help shrinking back. Even if he wanted to give her countless things, in truth, he was someone who could do nothing, and so he seemed terribly shabby. The heroine noticed him and immediately chased after him, asking why he had not called her. He had something he wanted to say, didn't he? But the Grand Duke only glanced at her, then turned and walked away. He felt he should not stand in the way of her finding her own happiness. The heroine wanted to catch up to him, but her stamina gave out a little. At last, the Grand Duke turned back. He had not meant to make her so tired. She finally caught him and looked at him, asking why he was avoiding her. Was there some problem? Shouldn't they communicate? And the heroine saw through his thoughts at once. She said all the things in his heart aloud. The Grand Duke seriously suspected she could read minds. But of course it was like this. Proud and lonely male leads all had the same kind of inner thoughts. She had heard some of his story from Nicole and Knight Kenneth, and now knew how empty his heart had been and how much he had changed since she arrived. The Grand Duke thought he was a terrible person, strange-tempered, withdrawn, ugly, and overly proud. It was not that he doubted her choice, but compared to someone like him, surely someone else. The heroine told him to stop, then rammed her forehead right into his head. The romance fantasy hero was standing right in front of her, and he was still trying to hand over the sweet potato already in his grasp. Not a chance. This idiot. The more she listened, the less she could bear it. If you want to talk like that, then she had plenty of flaws too. For one thing, she was much older than him, and yet for the 3rd time in her life, she was marrying someone so much younger. That was downright shameless. Thinking of it that way, his flaws should not seem like much at all. After all, they had not become friends to nitpick those things. Besides, his subordinates all wanted him to be happy, so he should stop doing foolish things. Hurry up and take her hand. Was he planning to stay kneeling on the ground forever? Should they go for a walk together? The heroine felt that the Grand Duke had fallen for her, but she pretended not to know. How could the Grand Duke be fooled by just a few words from her? Since she was the one who caused it, did she have to take responsibility? While she was tangled in such thoughts, the Grand Duke opened the door and told her not to worry so much. He could pretend not to know anything. He did not want to become a burden to her. The heroine wondered if he could read minds too. Why did he know what she was thinking as well? But didn't he find her frustrating? Saying he was important while still being bound by the past. Didn't that make her seem ridiculous? But the Grand Duke said she was not ridiculous at all. He was already very happy now. He did not want her to have anything else to regret. Faced with a Grand Duke like this, the heroine still felt a little guilty. And right then, her foot sank into a snow pit. With a single motion, the Grand Duke lifted her up. He told Litra not to move around. There was especially heavy snow today, so they should go back inside first. If they left her foot like that, it might get injured. It would be better to soak it in warm water for a while. The heroine felt he did not need to go this far. It was too strange. She thought the Grand Duke seemed to have had a hard life. Even though he always said he had suffered greatly, there was not a single visible trace of hardship on her. But the Grand Duke said those were precisely the things the eye could not see. Going through death twice. Those were things she could never have endured lightly. And yet she still came to find him without the slightest hesitation. That was a very brave thing. The heroine had not expected him to understand her so well. Just continuing to hold on in that position had already been remarkable enough. She would try her best to overcome it. For now, she would be content with things as they were. When would she finally be able to answer this hard? They really should become a very good married couple. Now, outside, people were all saying that the union of the Beast Grand Duke of the North and the Monster Lady of the South was, in a certain sense, the strongest couple possible. When Litra's father, Baron Miltro, heard the rumors, he ground his teeth in anger and immediately prepared to go north. Litra's mother, Manus Miltro, said that Litra was not a child anymore. Was there really any need to rush off to find her like this? But they had both heard the rumors. That day, he had personally seen Duke Chevalier causing a huge uproar in the capital with his own eyes. It was an incident so frightening that no one present had even dared bring it up afterward. Although in the imperial family, it would have been judged as treason, the emperor had instead found it quite entertaining. After that, Duke Chevalier never again left the north. When it came time to bring Litra back, he wondered whether he should prepare himself for bloodshed. He truly now understood how a king must feel when going to rescue a princess captured by the Demon King. But when they really arrived, they found their daughter was doing well, and the Grand Duke seemed quite honest too. For a moment, they both stared blankly. It was actually this harmonious. She even seemed to be treated well. Looking at this scene, they had clearly had no need to come at all. Who could have imagined that after marriage, the Grand Duke would become like a different person? Her mother said directly that they came because they were worried about her. After all, with such a frail body, she had actually come to live in the north. The heroine realized something had changed. In the original story, the heroine did not have a very good relationship with her parents. In this life, they had hardly even spoken. Weren't they not very concerned about her? No matter what she did, hadn't they been too indifferent even to talk to her? Her father angrily said that was not true at all. When she was little, she had once gotten so sick she nearly died. How could they bear to nag her? And after that, she stayed home all the time, and they had never said anything. Then she suddenly married a beast, so of course they were worried. Only after saying it did he realize he had misspoken, and he became terrified that the Grand Duke would kill him. The Grand Duke sighed and told him to relax. He was already used to that title. Then he shyly said that he was Litra's father. Wouldn't that make him the Grand Duke's father-in-law? The Grand Duke thought to himself that he needed to make a good impression. Hearing that, her father fainted on the spot from shock. Her mother said to leave him alone for now and asked what exactly was going on. They should never have met even once before, right? The heroine dragged their fated bond from a previous life into the explanation. But her mother did not entirely believe her, and even said that before, she had liked the kind of people who were delicate flowers raised in greenhouses. Seeing the Grand Duke fall into thought, the heroine quickly told him not to overthink it. Why would her mother say something like that? Her mother looked helpless and said they would not interfere too much. But then why had she not sent a letter home? In name, they were still her parents, yet they had to hear the news from someone else. The heroine could only apologize and say it was her mistake because they were people she should have kept in touch with often. Her mother said there was no need to apologize since their fault was greater. And seeing that she would probably live well here, she was relieved. The heroine smiled and said that was all thanks to her husband. But for them to fully accept it, they still needed time. Could they stay a few days? After returning, she thought the Grand Duke must have been flustered, but he said he had actually been happy. Still, he had one question. What did she mean by nearly dying when she was young? It turned out that unlike her previous life, her body in this life was especially weak. It was probably because she had been revived 3 times, and the protective blessing that had once guarded her was now gone. The excessive burden placed on her body could only be borne by herself. She never would have expected that this would become the reason her parents worried so much. But now she was fine. Back then, she had endured by thinking of him, because only in her heart could she feel that kind of closeness. It was rather embarrassing. If she had not had those scars, maybe she would not have proposed a contract marriage at all, and would have simply proposed to him directly. Anyway, they had already become husband and wife in name, and from now on they would face difficulties together. First, they needed to deal with her father. Simply being excessively nice to him did not seem likely to solve the problem. It might even backfire. Her father had come because he was worried about her, so all they had to do was let him see how happy they were every day. That method was actually working. The fact that her father had started secretly following her was proof enough. Even now, he still did not trust the Grand Duke and believed he was a vicious beast merely pretending to be tame. And what he needed to do now was catch him in the act. Her mother smiled and told him that would never work. The Grand Duke had received professional training. His stalking had been exposed long ago. If he insisted on being this stubborn, the only one who would suffer was himself. Meanwhile, her mother simply went directly to see her daughter. When her father realized following them was ineffective, he overheard several attendants whispering among themselves. He discovered that the Grand Duke seemed to be plotting something and rushed over to find out. But the Grand Duke quickly noticed him. And what the Grand Duke had secretly been preparing was a fresh and elegant family banquet for the period of their visit. Her father was stunned. This was the banquet hall. The subordinates had deliberately let themselves be overheard, fearing he must be worried that the Grand Duke meant ill. Her father no longer understood what he was even doing. He could not understand why the Grand Duke was not angry even after being misunderstood like this. The Grand Duke said he did not think that way at all. After all, he had indeed left a poor impression on Litra's father before. If family members worried over someone important to him, then to him, that was actually something worth being happy about. And the Grand Duke was sincere toward Litra. Looking at the magnificent hall before him, her father said that Litra had never even had a proper debut because of her health. She had spent most of her life shut away at home and had hardly met anyone. On top of that, outside there were only bad rumors about her. He wanted to ask the Grand Duke to make sure the banquet was arranged as splendidly as possible, and also what was to be done about his gloomy appearance. His hair was unkempt, and as a Grand Duke, he did not even wear a single ornament. Over on the heroine's side, this was the first time she heard about the banquet. She heard it was meant to be a surprise for her. She laughed, saying the Grand Duke must have worked so hard to keep it hidden. Then she would have to dress up properly. Soon the Grand Duke came to find her. He had changed into very formal clothes. It was the first time he had dressed like this, so he felt a little embarrassed. She stared at him in a daze. If the Grand Duke put in the effort, he was actually very handsome. But now he had even learned to tease her, asking whether he looked like a flower from a greenhouse. Soon, they entered the hall. The protagonists had finally arrived. The heroine had thought it would only be a family banquet, but she had not expected there to be so many people. In truth, the Grand Duke had put some thought into it. He wanted everyone to see how much he treasured the young lady. To Litra, this day felt like a dream. She wanted the Grand Duke to invite her to dance. The Grand Duke was slightly startled. Even at a time like this, he was still impeccably courteous. When he bowed an invitation, he did not even dare let his lips touch her hand. Yet she told him that was fine. Only then did the Grand Duke shyly ask her to dance. It was truly amazing. Thinking back to their first meeting, she had never imagined they would one day dance together like this. The way they looked now, it was as if they had gone beyond friends and become a real married couple. Her father felt deeply gratified. He had thought he would never see such a sight in this lifetime. Her mother sighed in agreement. Seeing the two of them so happy was truly wonderful. The banquet today had been so delightful. Litra felt very happy. Thanks to that, her parents left at ease. Doing something pleasant like this once in a while did not seem bad at all. And after dressing up, the Grand Duke really did look much better. Without the beard, he did not look nearly so fierce. Why had he grown a beard in the first place? The Grand Duke said it was because of a rather uninteresting story. Everyone knew the Grand Duke had imperial blood, and because of that, he was often threatened. But one day, before he had even come of age, his face was injured during a campaign to subjugate magical beasts, and after that, those restraints lessened. From then on, he tried his best not to appear like a noble and constantly showed others that he had no interest in politics whatsoever. The master who lived in that dazzling imperial palace wanted him to display the image of a beast slaughtering magical beasts. Within that murderous expression, she felt the weight of his sense of responsibility. And she herself was one of the people he protected. That made her feel very safe. Sometimes there was no need to forcefully break the spell trapping the beast, because reality was not a fairy tale. After hearing such a story, how could she possibly force the Grand Duke to change his appearance? In the novel, because his relationship with the imperial family was also poor, he was a character who would not help. Crown Prince Abito, those few brief lines of description were the entirety of his existence. But at this moment, this man was the protagonist of her world. Even if they were husband and wife only on paper, she still wanted to protect the North together with the Grand Duke. This almost sounded like a confession, and the Grand Duke's face turned bright red in an instant. And now, the most precious thing to the Grand Duke was the person in his arms. Anyone who wanted to hurt Litra would have to step over his corpse first. The nobles reacted rather ordinarily to Litra's marriage alliance, but they were still somewhat wary. After all, he carried imperial blood. With the arrival of a new day, Litra came to see the Grand Duke because she had something to ask. Unexpectedly, she saw that when the Grand Duke worked, he wore glasses. The heroine laughed and teased him, asking if he had presbyopia already. He was so young, and yet already like this? But in truth, the Grand Duke was merely farsighted. She had come to ask whether any nobles had been bothering him lately. As news of the marriage slowly spread, there should be people beginning to guard against him. The Grand Duke found this rather troublesome. Right now, every move he made could easily be misunderstood. He would probably be quite busy lately, but he would still make time to be with her. She did not want to hinder the Grand Duke. At a time like this, she needed to show a little ability. She glanced at the documents. As expected, they were all familiar names. The confirmation of the list ends here. She smiled and said they only needed to bankrupt their family line for 3 generations. In her previous life, these people had stabbed her in the back. She could treat this as taking revenge while she was at it. Hearing that, the Grand Duke became very excited and wanted to wipe them all out right now. But she stopped him since that would leave evidence. Maybe it would feel satisfying at the time, but afterward it would be troublesome. The Grand Duke felt that merely bankrupting them was letting them off too easily. But in truth, it was not because she was kind. It was because she knew that living was more painful than dying. After all, only while alive could they experience this endless hell. For now, all the Grand Duke had to do was trust her. One document especially caught her eye. The handwriting on it was crooked and ugly beyond belief. Embarrassed, the Grand Duke said that was the handwriting he used for the outside world. After all, with the image he presented outwardly, writing an elegant script would be strange. So in her previous life, the reason she had only received the Grand Duke's elegant handwriting, something that had once filled her with admiration, was because that handwriting itself was a sign of his trust, realizing that made her very happy. And in this life as well, she had never received anything written in that crude hand. That was because after reading the letters from the future, the Grand Duke never used that style when writing to her again. Still, there was one thing the Grand Duke found strange. How had Abito, who had been so obsessively fixated on her, allowed them in the previous life to exchange letters for 5 years? The heroine looked troubled as she explained. Because Abito had never considered her a rival at all, and he was full of arrogance toward her. Thinking about it carefully, she felt she should have dumped him back then. She had been too kind at the time. And just then, a visitor arrived outside, Priest Honoré. The moment he came in, he saw a scene he should not have seen. The priest wanted to leave, but the Grand Duke stopped him. He had called him here because of Litra. Since Litra often fell ill, he was worried about her and had invited the priest over. Still, thanks to Priest Honoré verifying those letters, she and Peruse had been able to marry smoothly. It had been a long time since he had felt divine power. The priest sensed a special aura. It was the trace of an exceptionally strong divine blessing. For now, there was no major problem. Aside from somewhat poor stamina, she was still healthy. But no matter what, the two of them needed to stay together often. Priest Honoré did not know the exact reason, but if the two of them stayed together, the divine blessing would recover somewhat. Could it be because of that thought she had before making her wish? So now she had to stay close to the Duke. That really was for the best. At last, the priest said that all she needed now were regular checkups. Then he withdrew. Litra fell into thought. If her divine blessing could recover, she would be able to do far more than she could now. It was getting late. Before long, they had finished processing the documents. Working together made everything much more efficient. The Duke sighed with emotion. Thanks to the especially brutal education he received as a child, no matter how many papers there were, he could finish them in the blink of an eye. With the remaining time, they went for a walk together. Considering safety, the Duke was fully dressed and had even put on his armor. He feared running into danger. After all, magical beasts occasionally wandered into the territory here. With him around, Litra had nothing to fear from any threat. The north was where the Duke had grown up, and it was also a place he could never bear to lose. He wanted to show Litra everything properly. Holding out alone in such a vast place for so long must have been unimaginably difficult. That was why Peruse had so many scars on his body. Yet when she thought of him, his impressive physique kept rising unbidden in her mind, which left her terribly embarrassed. She walked forward stiffly, urging herself to move. Up ahead was a fountain. Because of the northern weather, it often froze over. So the fountain no longer served its original purpose. The village had probably turned it into a side attraction to make a little money, filling it with lots of coins. At the Duke's suggestion, she decided to try it too. It had been a long time since she had made a wish. This time, her wish was that in this life, she might walk a more peaceful path. And so the Duke wanted to make a wish as well. He hoped that in this life, Litra would live without regrets and spend her whole life in happiness. Though her later years have been heavy with sorrow, focusing only on the ending would always leave regrets. Even though she had lived longer than he had, the Duke saw things more clearly than she did and always knew how to comfort her. Yet since she had only made a wish for herself, she had no way to respond to the Duke's feelings. Even if fear kept her from answering him now, she still wanted to make some kind of change, even if only a little. Though she could not say it aloud, she wanted to show it through her actions. But just then, magical beasts appeared, utterly ruining the mood. She had known it would not go so smoothly. Everyone had already begun driving the beasts away and still needed the Duke's help. The Duke, quite obviously, was even angrier than she was. This time they were all flying beasts, and there were simply too many of them. No one knew what kind of complication might arise. With a plan already in mind, the Duke suddenly picked her up and leaped into the sky. Litra was nearly scared to death. She had heard before that the Duke's martial skill was extraordinary. In truth, anyone who had ever witnessed Duke Peruse's strength would inevitably come to respect him deeply. Now she understood why. The Duke held her in his arms while cutting down enemies, and even in a moment like this, he still had the presence of mind to shield her from blood. He even said that to him, this was as easy as breathing. When the battle ended, she was still perfectly clean, while the Duke himself was covered in a complete mess. That kind of protectiveness truly moved her. She did not want to remain someone who could only be protected by him. She wanted to become his companion. Even if she ended up filthy, she would not mind. Lost in their sweet little world, they had already forgotten everything else. That night, the Duke brought up what had happened that morning. It had seemed like she wanted to say something then. It was still a little awkward for her. After all, the right moment had already passed, but she still did what she had not finished doing. In the end, she kissed the Duke on the lips. Though she had covered part of it with her hand, the Duke was already thoroughly flustered. Seeing that he was about to leave, Litra stopped him, unable to make a verbal promise. She could only express herself this way. She had thought a kiss might be enough, but the wounds in her heart still remained. Since she could not do it herself, perhaps she could let the Duke take the initiative. The moment he heard that, the Duke fell into a panic. Litra only wanted to get a little closer to the Duke, which is why she had done this. The Duke had no choice but to agree, telling her that if she felt any rejection at all, she had to say so. But in truth, she did not feel repulsed at all. On the contrary, her heart was racing, and she felt her pulse flutter. Still, before long, the Duke ended the kiss. He said his heart felt like it was about to burst. The expression on his face was so funny that Litra could not help laughing out loud. The majestic Duke, who would have thought he would be so nervous while kissing? Really, the timing today simply had not been right. Neither of them had been properly prepared. Litra thought they ought to practice a few more times. That way he would not get so flustered. Besides, kissing the Duke had been even nicer than she had imagined. Though if it troubled him, then never mind. The Duke had always indulged her. But it was already late, so they had to sleep first. Even so, it was destined to be a sleepless night. When she woke again, she realized she had suffered from insomnia the whole previous night. By the bedside was a letter the Duke had left behind. In that letter, the Duke wished her good morning and hoped that seeing it would bring her joy. Though he was not the Duke from her previous life, he was still making her happy in his own way. That made her treasure these feelings all the more, so she decided to write back. Another letter she sent out was for Peruse. Its destination was the West. Litra was once again preparing to stir up something interesting with a plan to guide a rival into bankruptcy. Now she really ought to be called the Duchess of Chevalier. She weighed every phrase and every sentence, weaving them together like cloth to convey each other's hearts. Even the tiniest trivial matter felt like one part of some grand story. Even though the two of them were right in front of each other, she still loved writing letters, and once she started, she would go on until late. The Duke simply took away her pen and made her go to sleep. Lying in bed, she mentioned that a guest would be arriving tomorrow, and the Duke said he would receive him properly, but he was going to regret saying that. The next morning, the guest threw himself at Litra the moment he saw her, affectionately calling her name. The guest's overly clingy behavior immediately gave the Duke the wrong idea, while Litra hurried to clear things up. This frivolous fellow was Carta, the owner of a massive business empire, known as the King of Western Commerce. He was also one of the original novel's second male leads. He and Litra worked very well together in business, and he was someone who could truly keep a secret. In several of her past lives, he had been an excellent business partner. But this man had one fatal flaw. He loved expressing friendship far too enthusiastically. The Duke was already glaring at him viciously. If he caused Litra any trouble, he would be thrown straight out. Perhaps that sort of behavior had not mattered before, but now she was married, so it really ought to stop. While she was ill, she also needed an economic foundation she could negotiate with the Duke on equal terms. She wanted Carta to serve as the North's commercial agent. Even if the Duke might never want to see him again afterward, she still had to try. Carta said he was willing to help her, and if she failed, he would even take Litra in and treat her well. What he had not expected was that Litra would actually persuade the Duke. Had he known, he would never have help. The Duke felt deeply displeased. Someone helping Litra ought to count as his benefactor as well, yet he was still thoroughly unhappy about it. He had once said that Litra's guest was his guest, so even toward someone he disliked, he still forced a smile and told him to treat this place like his own home. Carta was terrified. The Duke was smiling like he wanted to kill someone. He immediately hid behind Litra, but to his surprise, Litra even said the Duke looked rather cute like this. The reason she had summoned Carta this time was to ask him to help her husband. As she spoke, she handed him the documents. Though the man was a bit glib, he was exceptionally capable in matters like this. And he was reliable as well, so there was no need to worry about being found out. All they had to do was watch. That way, they could live happily together. Even in a moment like this, the third wheel presence still stubbornly made his presence known, stunned that their relationship was so intimate. Carta openly expressed his admiration, saying that he had liked Litra from the very first moment he saw her. If nothing else worked, he even offered to become her little lover, leaving both of them utterly dumbfounded. Aside from remaining loyal to her, the Duke had also thought that even if Litra met someone else, he should not interfere. He did not want to use selfishness to bind someone who had once been tormented by obsession. No matter whom Litra chose, he believed he had to respect it. Faced with Carta's shameless wheedling, Litra felt nothing but disgust. There was nothing good about it at all. Carta even asked the Duke what he thought. Wasn't someone as beautiful as Litra worthy of being loved by many? The Duke actually paused to consider it. Though he felt deeply uncomfortable, his answer was still strangely reasonable. When it came to praising Litra, the two of them unexpectedly found common ground. At that moment, Litra stepped in boldly. She declared that there was only one person in her heart, and she would absolutely allow no second person to exist there. Finally, they returned to the main topic. Carta examined the documents closely and found the plan quite sound. There was profit to be made from it. By then, Litra was already out of stamina, so she said she would leave it to him. Even then, Carta did not forget to tease her, asking why she had tired herself out so quickly. But wasn't she exhausted precisely because of the two of them? The Duke was already itching to strike him down. Watching from the side, Carta thought the two of them looked sweet enough to be true love. Hearing those words, Litra instinctively grew uneasy and immediately denied that kind of relationship. Carta could not understand why she would deny it. To anyone looking, they clearly seemed to be in love. The Duke cut him off, warning that if he kept saying things that made him uncomfortable, he would never let him off. Litra pushed the Duke's hand aside and said it was fine. She wanted to speak with Carta alone. Once the Duke left, she let out a long sigh, then turned and demanded to know what Carta was trying to do. He had been testing her husband from the very beginning. With his cover blown, Carta stopped pretending. He had worked hard to come all this way because the rumors said the Duke was a bad man, so he had come to stir up trouble. After all, he and Litra were the best of partners. If Peruse truly had been the savage man the rumors described, Carta had been prepared for that as well. But now none of it mattered. What surprised him was that even now, Litra was still afraid of love. She had said long ago that she feared love, and even now she still did. Though so much time had passed, fear did not vanish overnight. Making the Duke wait for her filled her with guilt. Carta understood at once. She simply liked him. There was no need to overcomplicate it. She should just try, simply and directly. She really had fallen for the Duke. After Carta's blunt advice, she finally understood her own heart completely. She had not expected that this madman would actually help her. As for why Carta had helped, he told Litra to go try confessing. Meanwhile, Duke Peru Chevalier was sinking into despair. Litra had already been shoved right up in front of him. Carta said Litra had something to tell him. Before she could even speak, the Duke was already wondering whether she was about to divorce him. The two of them had gone outside, but she still did not know how to say it. The Duke had looked so downcast back in the room that she had let him out. The Duke imagined every possible outcome, but the one thing he feared most was her leaving him. So he suddenly crouched down and said that he wanted to stay by her side. Nothing else mattered. As long as she was happy, as long as he could have her gaze upon him, By the end of it, the Duke even said he would be willing to become her concubine. She could not understand how things had turned out like this, but she finally found herself able to express her feelings. She took the Duke's hand directly, and the words that had been so hard to say finally came out. She liked him. The Duke could not believe it was real and even wondered if she was sick. He always put her safety before his own feelings. The Duke was unfailingly kind, and that was exactly what she liked about him. If the matter were as simple as choosing between apples and strawberries, she felt she could keep going. Carta had helped her shift her thinking. And Carta was not a bad person. At first, she had truly thought of him only as a friend, but later he had gradually started to like her. Even knowing that her heart already belonged to someone else, he still sincerely wished for her happiness. So at a time like this, how could she still keep fearing love? Litra happily declared that as long as she was with the Duke, everything would surely work out. Hearing that, Carta could finally leave in peace. She had to live well, he told her, and if she was unhappy, he would definitely come and take her away. She absolutely had to be happy. Before leaving, he still did not forget to add that when the time came, she had to let him be the concubine. Litra believed he was not a bad man, which was why she had told him so much. She had once given someone her sincere heart, and the price she paid had been dreadful. Still, thanks to Carta, she had grown used to hugging the Duke. Speaking of himself, Carta admitted that he had once shared a similar fear. Long ago, Duke Calypse Chevalier had a very close friend. Their friendship seemed unbreakable, but bitterly enough, that friend was blinded by power and murdered Calypse Chevalier and his wife after the Emperor grew suspicious of them. So Carta had become deeply afraid of trusting others, though that was already in the past. The reason he had overcome it now was because he did not want to deepen his regrets any further. Fortunately, he had managed to hold on. Whether in love or friendship, having someone you have sincerely cared for change their heart is a terribly painful thing. A letter from Carta arrived. The plan he had set in motion would soon begin, and in about a month, the first results should start to appear. Recently, some strange rumors had begun to spread. It was said that beasts once seen only in the north had started appearing in parts of the south as well. That was highly suspicious. The letter also expressed concern for her. Things were gradually advancing toward the original novel's setting. In her first life, she had read a novel called The Day the Lovebird Bloomed. It told the story of a young noblewoman from a guardian family who sought to stop the magical beasts appearing in her territory. She traveled to the imperial capital, met many people along the way, resolved increasingly serious events and crises, and ultimately saved the world from disaster. The news of magical beasts appearing in the south was the very opening chapter of that story. Before long, magical beasts would begin appearing in Baron Miltro's territory as well, so they needed to climb the mountain again. The reason she had to suffer through this now was because there was a flower in the northern mountains that could halt the worsening state of the world. If that flower, which held divine power, were plucked, the world would return to balance, and the magical beasts would grow weak and listless. And only she could pick it. Fortunately, the Duke was with her. But with how weak her body was in this life, climbing mountains really might freeze her to death. After a short rest before moving on, she finally felt she could breathe again. In the book, the Duke had rejected Abido's request to open a mountain path so they could obtain the flower. As he refused, he had said that if all they did was ignore the north, then whether the world perished or not had nothing to do with him. Because of that, Litra felt especially uneasy, worried that perhaps she was making him do something he disliked. In her previous life, she herself had often wished for the world to end. That way she would not have had to go to work. In truth, she no longer worried about the fate of the world quite so much. Now she only wanted to stay home and idly chat with her adorable younger husband. Perhaps for some people, life in a broken world could still be happy. But she wanted to walk toward the future in this world together with the person she cherished. Though troublesome, she could only willingly become a hero. Now, she wanted to keep living even more than before. After sharing a kiss with the Duke, she did not forget to tease him, saying his kissing skills had improved. The Duke wanted to ask her to pay more attention to him. Though Litra was slowly overcoming her fears, it still was not time yet, and in the end, he could not bring himself to say it. But Litra had already noticed what he was thinking. After all, his reactions really were adorable. Blushing, he stammered that. He had only said that because he cared about her. Whenever he was nervous, he made jokes. Even though she had already lived through 2 lives, she still became nervous as her feelings deepened. And whenever she did not joke around, the atmosphere became unbearably awkward. Just as the mood was turning strangely delicate, a monster appeared behind them. Again, the Duke was thoroughly displeased. The Duke fell into thought. In such a narrow place, using his weapon was inconvenient, and if things continued like this, the cave might collapse. He could only switch from his long sword to fighting barehanded. At this moment, Litra could only stay behind him and watch. The magical beast had appeared too suddenly. The Duke had not even had time to put on his armor, and that worried her. Thinking the Duke might get hurt, she wanted to help too. Meanwhile, the Duke was fighting desperately to protect Litra. Then suddenly, he noticed an arrow from somewhere strike the beast. When Litra had come, she had prepared a bow and arrows in advance for self-defense. She had not expected they would really come in handy. The Duke felt rather helpless. That weapon was truly too much for her. She might get hurt. But Litra did not care. Seeing her husband throw himself into danger, she could not possibly remain indifferent. And the Duke's habit of neglecting his own safety infuriated her as well. After dealing with the magical beast, they cleaned up and went to sleep. The next day, Litra still could not help lecturing him. The Duke paid far too little attention to his own safety. Yet those concerned words made him secretly happy. The freezing winter suddenly felt warm. Litra struck first, taking the Duke's hand and saying it felt almost like a honeymoon trip. When spring came, they could go somewhere even more beautiful. But the instant she said it, she felt a bad premonition. Sure enough, a gigantic magical beast appeared behind them. The Duke immediately stepped in front of Litra. The flower atop that monster's head was exactly what she was looking for, and only she could pick it. So they moved quickly. Litra explained from the side that unless the flower on the beast's head was plucked, it could not be killed. And touching that flower was no easy task. Moreover, the beast could sense Litra's location, so no matter where they hid, it would find them. Though it looked difficult, the Duke casually swung his great sword and lopped off one of the beast's arms. Combined with Litra's knowledge from her previous life, the task suddenly became much easier. As for ending the battle quickly, she had thought of one method. At the critical moment, he would throw her. She seized the flower, and the beast, deprived of it, soon collapsed. Litra's body dropped naturally through the air, yet she felt no fear at all, because there was always one person who would catch her and set her down safely. The Duke, however, was nearly frightened to death. He absolutely did not want to go through that a second time. Meanwhile, at a church elsewhere, the power of the god began to manifest. The direction indicated by that light was the north. Steam swirled through the bath. After returning home, Litra enjoyed a long, luxurious soak. After this adventure, her bond with the Duke had deepened even more. She had once experienced a beautiful romance, and at the same time it had become the blade that stabbed back into her. Even after meeting a new lover, those wounds still remained buried in her heart. Even a perfect lover could not create a perfect relationship. She had never truly believed she could overcome those hurts. In his own room, the Duke asked the butler about the scars on his back. The butler had never seen his master pay attention to his own appearance before, so it turned out the Duchess was worried that he had been injured. The butler was speechless. If the Duke wanted to know, he should just ask the Duchess directly. Just then, Litra pushed open the door, and the butler told her what his master had been concerned about. The moment she heard it, Litra grew alarmed, thinking the Duke had truly been hurt. The butler tactfully stepped away. During that battle, the Duke had suffered a tiny wound. Litra immediately came over to bandage him. Even a small injury mattered greatly to her. The Duke thought his wife was worried that he might not be capable enough, and he could not help sinking into gloom. But Litra simply felt heartache over the wounds the Duke had endured. It was a warmth the Duke had never known before. Still, remembering what Litra had done in the midst of battle left him feeling rather helpless. At times, his wife was too reckless. If things had gone even slightly wrong, he could not guarantee that he would be able to bear the consequences of losing her. Litra felt a little regretful. She wanted to take one step further with the Duke, yet her heart still resisted. The Duke, however, did not mind. In name, they were already husband and wife, and matters of feeling could proceed slowly. And as for the Duke's affection for her, Litra's unease gradually lessened. Their relationship had even reached the point where they could help dress one another. Yet the very next day, Litra came down with a fever. The Duke was extremely displeased. How could something as absurd as a cold exist in this world? Long ago, since the day he began guarding this land, he had worked tirelessly and conscientiously. But Litra's appearance had been like a ray of light, illuminating his pitch-dark world. That was why even something as simple as her running a fever made him extraordinarily anxious. The priest launched into a rapid stream of words. The one treating her was the high priest Astrum. At a glance, he saw that Litra was someone chosen by the gods. In her first life, she had once collapsed from overwork, but the gods had mistakenly assumed she was already dead and had forcibly pulled out her soul, causing a huge misunderstanding. In her previous life, the high priest had never come north. This time, perhaps because of the flower, he had come here, even disguised as an assistant priest. So Litra asked why he had come. The high priest frankly said that he had sensed an immensely powerful divine force and had come to investigate. Litra understood. After all, the high priest was a figure of enormous influence. If he had arrived openly without concealing his identity, it would have caused political turmoil. The chief god of this world was Nort. If the high priest had come directly to visit the duke, and the royal family learned of it, they would surely feel their power was threatened and begin taking all kinds of measures, creating trouble for the duke. The duke, however, cared nothing at all about the high priest's arrival. He only cared about his wife's condition. Litra could only feel helpless. High Priest Astrum was one of the male leads in the novel. He had lived in the temple since childhood and was a man of deep faith. In her previous life, he had helped her a great deal. The one thing he disliked, however, was her contact with the Duke. Though at that time she had been emperor, so the High Priest's worries had not been unreasonable. When the High Priest came to the north, he had not expected to find someone chosen by the gods so quickly. Still, the fewer people who knew of this matter, the better. Judging by that man's personality, he would certainly push her toward the highest position again. The Duke stepped forward first and asked the High Priest to keep these secrets. The High Priest had been thinking the same thing. A person chosen by the gods ought to enjoy only beautiful things, not be burdened by the trouble caused by those who stirred up strife for no reason. Just then, the Duke said with a grave expression that he had an important request. They had thought it must be something serious, but the Duke simply asked them to cure Litra's cold. Though it was only a minor illness, he cared about it deeply. He even pleaded for Litra to understand. How could she possibly refuse such a request? After all, the Duke was worried about her, and that alone was already the best thing of all. On the way back, the priest could not help sighing that the Duke and the young lady had such a good relationship. The way they cherished each other looked almost like an arrangement made by the gods. Yet the high priest had other thoughts. No matter how loving they were, they would only become material for gossip and slander. The Duke's reputation was simply too bad. Sooner or later, it would definitely bring trouble to Litra, so he intended to separate them. Because someone chosen by the gods should enjoy a better life, not remain in this bitterly cold land. As for Litra, she solemnly declared that from now on, she needed to exercise. This body was too weak and would be terribly inconvenient for what lay ahead. The Duke did not want her to push herself too hard, but the matter did need to be put on the agenda. The only problem was that she had not yet decided what kind of exercise to do. Besides running and walking, she wanted something that would be enjoyable too. The Duke offered a suggestion. What about riding? Litra was stunned. Riding a horse in this mountainous terrain? So the next day, the Duke brought her to the stables. Because the environment here was so harsh, the horses had evolved and become carnivorous. Litra could hardly believe the creature before her could still be called a horse. But the Duke said it was indeed a horse. It just happened to carry half the blood of a magical beast from its evolution. The Duke even said the horse was very gentle. Litra had no choice but to steel herself and reach out to touch it, only to discover that it really was fairly docile. Litra sat on the horse while the Duke led it forward. The more they went on, the more suspicious she became. This did not feel like exercise at all. It felt more like a date. The Duke grew a little embarrassed on hearing that. He had only wanted Litra to enjoy some leisurely time. He was worried that she was overworking herself. In her first life, Litra had been so busy dealing with immediate problems that she had been mentally exhausted. In her second life, she had wanted to end the hardships of the original story as quickly as possible so that she could live a little more easily. But in the end, it had become another exhausting and tragic conclusion. Now in this life, the moment she picked up a pen, she wanted to do something again. That was why she had accepted Carda's help back then. But even in this life, she could not rest easy. The disasters to come could not be ignored. The more one knew, the heavier the responsibility became. After a moment of silence, the Duke swung himself up onto the horse and took her along as they admired the scenery around them. He was not as knowledgeable as Litra, nor could he foresee the future. The only thing he could do was stand firmly at her side. He would bear the burden of the future together with Litra. That simple promise moved her deeply. It was more beautiful than any love confession. In the imperial palace, the crown prince leisurely stirred his coffee. Not long ago, the high priest had come to him and said that there was a woman trapped in the duke's household in that frozen northern land, a regrettable situation, and urged him to get involved with the duke. The idea of rescuing that woman and dealing with that beast of a man left him thoroughly displeased. Monolith Tekka learned of the crown prince's worries and offered to drive a wedge between that woman and the duke so that they would regret their marriage. The crown prince was delighted. That was exactly the effect he wanted. Monica Tekka was willing to play the villain. Meanwhile, the duke was drilling his soldiers. While training, he chatted with Litra. A letter had arrived from the Tekka Marquis house, addressed to the Duchess. Litra was delighted when she saw it. It was an invitation from Monica. This young lady had been Litra's good friend in her previous life. In the original novel, she was the Crown Prince's fiancée and a classic antagonist who mainly obstructed the relationship between the heroine and Obito. Monica was like the queen of high society. She was an extremely ambitious woman and had even schemed against Litra more than once for her own benefit. Naturally, for the heroine who saved the world, Monica's final fate had been to lose everything. Yet Litra had been very dissatisfied with that plotline. So after ascending the throne, she had granted Monica the authority she desired. After that, Monica had taught her strictly like a teacher, and in the end they became very close friends. So to Litra, Monica was someone worthy of trust. And as for why Obito had become so deeply obsessed with her, one of the biggest reasons was that she often met with Monica. Monica Tekka was highly skilled in social circles and frequently introduced talented people. The Crown Prince did not want Litra to have any social connections at all. He had even become intensely hostile toward Monica. Hearing this, the Duke felt a chill run down his spine. The Crown Prince was exactly the sort of person who pushed anything he disliked onto others, while still wanting to control everything from behind the scenes. The Duke, for his part, did not mind helping remove such a man. But Litra did not want to go that far just yet. Both of them wore dark, scheming expressions. It still was not time. The Duke had poor relations with the Tekka Marquis house. As a collateral branch of the royal family, the Marquis had long looked down on him. But because the North controlled the magic stones, the Marquis did not dare openly turn against him. Even so, the Duke did not want to stop Litra from going just because of himself. Though once he agreed, he knew he would not be able to see Litra for several days. But Litra did not mind if the Duke came with her. It was about time for them to make an appearance together. This was a good opportunity. Over at the Tekka Marquis house, they were already waiting for the Duke's arrival. In truth, Monica had never sincerely intended to help the Crown Prince. She had only planned to send an invitation as a formality. She had never expected an actual reply from them. That person had never appeared in high society even once, and she had no idea how to deal with him. Before long, the Duke's carriage arrived. Even the horse alone delivered a tremendous shock to the Marquis. Soon the Duke stepped out of the carriage. Then Litra emerged from behind him. Monica instinctivement sensait danger. This Duchess of Chevalier was no simple figure. Once they arrived at the estate, Litra requested a private meeting with Monica, while the Duke had already taken the count away separately. Now it was time for the two women to talk alone. Litra was astonishingly casual, telling Monica to sit wherever she liked. Though Monica found it strange, she did not dare slight her. After all, the Duke was known as the Beast. He had actually come here for his wife. Monica had no idea what might happen next. Litra did not beat around the bush and directly asked why Monica had invited her here. After all, Litra had been born poor and had never once appeared in social circles. Monica's sudden invitation had to have a reason. No matter how close they had been in a previous life, they had no connection in this one. From the perspective of family interests, they might very well be plotting against her. So for now, Litra needed to be firm. She directly overturned a teacup and said they might as well speak plainly. Monica was startled at the sight. Suddenly, she realized that all along, she had been unconsciously swayed by Litra's words and actions. So she showed a faint smile and said that since the Duchess had come from afar, she must be tired. Even though Litra had behaved rather rudely, Monica still maintained perfect noble composure and had sweets brought out, saying there was no need to rush and they could talk slowly. Litra, however, was not anxious. She had behaved that way only to draw Monica's attention. Her goal had been achieved, and now she wanted to go see her adorable husband. Hearing Litra describe the Duke that way, Monica felt as though she had been struck by lightning. She simply could not imagine the Duke being described as adorable. Meanwhile, the Count was no longer capable of remaining calm. If the Duke kept this up, not a single knight of the Tekka house would be left standing. Yet the Duke merely said he was just loosening up a little. After saying that, he did not forget to mock them, remarking that the Count's knights were too weak to take a beating. The Duke had defeated a whole group using nothing but a tree branch. It was then that a boy standing beneath a tree witnessed everything and asked the Duke to teach him swordsmanship. The Count cried out, "Topaz!" The Duke turned to look. Before coming here, Litra had deliberately instructed him that if he saw a boy named Topaz, he should try to act as kindly as possible. She had even described the boy's appearance in detail. The boy before him was that very person Litra had mentioned. The Duke stepped forward and asked why he wanted to learn the sword. The boy said he had someone he wanted to protect. That person was Monica. He knew the Duke was strong. If he could learn even a little, that would be enough. The Duke agreed. Topaz was overjoyed. The Count stood stunned in place, unable to imagine why the Duke had agreed. Meanwhile, Peruse secretly felt rather proud, wondering how his wife would praise him later. Over on Litra's side, she and Monica were talking pleasantly. Monica, however, found a little hard to keep up. After all, it was the first time she had ever heard someone brag about her husband catching wild beasts with his bare hands. But before long, they got to the heart of the matter. Litra had already guessed that Monica had been sent to drive a wedge between her and the Duke. The reason Litra knew was simple. Monica had a habit. Whenever she fell in a deep thought, she would unconsciously cover her mouth with her fan. So Litra could immediately guess what Monica was thinking. Sure enough, Monica stiffened. Though Monica was still unwilling to admit it, Litra was willing to give her one more chance. But if there were a second invitation like this, she would not attend. Even without ever stepping outside Chevalier territory, she could still live very happily. Monica thought it over carefully, and after weighing the pros and cons, she decided she was willing to be honest. So she told Litra the whole story from beginning to end. Litra nodded in understanding and said that if Monica could let go of her prejudice, she would be able to see many more things, and those things would become her finest weapons. And if they became enemies, it would not be good for Monica. Besides, the Duke would never let them off. But Monica was not truly a bad person. With her talent, she would excel no matter where she went. So Litra was very willing to work with her. Monica also understood the current situation. When the time came, she would report to the Crown Prince that Litra Chevalier was an even stranger eccentric than the rumors suggested, and therefore got along extremely well with the Beast Duke. In exchange, however, any losses Monica suffered afterward would become Litra's responsibility. Meanwhile, the Duke was carefully teaching Topaz swordsmanship, yet the Count kept interfering from the side. This boy was an orphan the Tekka family had taken in. Because he had displayed exceptional talent in certain fields, he was cherished like a gem and carefully raised. If he was that important, then he should be taught properly all the more. As for the knights in the Count's residence, they were all show and no substance, with no real skill at all. Though he was called a beast, the Duke was rather satisfied with his current life. Just as he was about to leave, he turned and asked the boy one last time whether he truly intended to keep learning from him. Topaz firmly said yes, but the Duke would soon be leaving, so before going, he could only offer advice. Formally hire a swordsman who had actually seen real combat. That would truly help the boy. As for the Duke, he needed to go greet his wife. They had only been apart for a short while, yet they missed each other terribly. A brief separation only made their bond even stronger. Their casual intimacy in full public view left everyone present somewhat awkward. Soon the two of them departed. Litra hoped there would be another chance to meet Monica again. Perhaps next time they would become even closer. Monica, however, was not thinking that way at all. Then Topaz spoke up from beside her. He said there was something Litra had left behind on the table. Monica was startled and suddenly understood. Litra had planned this from the very beginning. The next time they met, she would find her father and tell him that their plan had to change. On the road, Litra smiled smugly. Monica was probably thoroughly confused by now. Litra wanted to use the Tekka family to keep the Crown Prince in check. As for the Duke, after giving the boy a little guidance, the remaining matters would be much easier to deal with. That child's real name was Farwell. He was Abito's half-brother by the same father, the Emperor's illegitimate son. In other words, he was the Duke's hidden relative, and the Tekka family wanted Topaz to sit on the throne. In fact, whether in the original story or in Litra's previous life, they had come very close to seizing the throne. After all, they had been planning it carefully for a very long time. But in this life, Litra did not intend to interfere with Monica Tekka's plan. In truth, even in her previous life, Monica had suggested that she marry the Duke. But back then, Litra had not believed it at all. Looking back on it now, he felt he should have listened to Monica sooner. And the idea of a contract marriage had also been influenced by Monica in his previous life. Hearing that, the Duke decided to cast aside all the unpleasantness between himself and the Tekka family. If Monica had not said those things back then, Litra would never have come here. The carriage slowly moved forward, while the Duke and Litra were still being intimate. The coachman had already started driving, and only after a while did they even notice. After washing up, Litra saw the Duke open the door and walk in, only to smack his head right against the door frame. Litra could not help trembling with laughter when she saw it. It seemed that tomorrow they would need to change to a roomier, more open place. Before leaving, she wanted to make sure High Priest Astrum learned his lesson, and then create more wonderful memories with the Duke. That night, Litra once again felt endlessly grateful that she had married the Duke, and that she could bring him to see the beauty of spring. The next day, she set out together with the Duke, and the happiest thing for the coachman was being far away from his employers. The reason Litra had wanted to bring the Duke here was because this place was very special. After being reborn twice, she had gone through a long period of being unable to adapt. At that time, life had been extremely hard. Mentally, she was an adult, but physically, she was a child carrying memories of a previous life. And on top of that, this body was not originally hers. Faced with an unpredictable future, she never knew what to do. There had been times when she wanted to run away. This was always the place she came to after fleeing. Back then, she had been running aimlessly and somehow ended up here. There was no one here except herself. It was an absolutely silent space. Only when she came to a place unrelated to the novel could she slowly accept that this was a living, breathing world. Here, she would collect herself, regain the strength to stand again, and then start over. This place held a different kind of meaning for her. And now, she had somewhere else to run to, the Duke's side. But sometimes, she still lacked confidence. After all, very few people in this world would believe that she had crossed over from another one. When the Crown Prince first heard her say it, he thought she was joking. In that kind of situation, the fact that the Duke chose to believe her made him all the more precious. Even the High Priest and the mages had not regarded her as a complete person, only as a means for faith, or merely an interesting research specimen. Hearing this, the Duke found it unbelievable. But no matter what, Litra still thought it was strange. After all, if she told people that a person's life was only a few written lines, most people would react badly. But the Duke thought that was only one part of life. What he worried about most was whether she had been lonely. After all, he had lived a life completely different from Litra's. But the one who could pull him out of painful memories was the Litra standing before him now. So he could understand the loneliness and sorrow of bearing all of this alone for so long. Litra fell silent for a moment. Then she directly pounced on the Duke. The person who completely understood her was right here beside her. Nothing was more important than that. Now she no longer needed to run away, nor did she feel alone. At that moment, in a corner of the forest, a woman saw a flash of light in front of her. It even made a strange sound, as if saying, "Hand me over to Litra." Litra truly wished they could stay here forever with no one to disturb them. Peruse suddenly felt uneasy. Every time he had that feeling, something strange always appeared. Sure enough, something strange showed up. That thing said it had been looking for her all this time. The guard apologized profusely. He could not destroy it, and it had followed them here. The thing was rather proud of itself, claiming to be the holiest existence of all. Then a gust of wind blew by, and it said it wanted to speak with her alone. Peruse held her shoulder and told her not to be afraid. If it was an enemy, he was ready to fight. Litra hurriedly explained that it was not an enemy, but an old grudge that existed in this world. The white light seemed hurt by her words. Litra did not take the being before her seriously at all, even if he was the god of this world. This was also the first time the Duke had ever seen a god. As the chief deity worshipped by all the people, Not was an absolute existence. To hear his voice once was supposed to be a supreme honor. But when he thought of how Litra had suffered for so long because of him, he would not even mind killing a god. Not was startled to see the Duke. He had clearly brought only Litra here. Why was Peruse here too? Only those who were permitted should have been able to enter. Litra walked right up and poked the god in the eye. What good had he ever done? How dared he glare here? Something must have gone wrong again. not felt a little guilty. In the previous life, the world had perished not long after her death. Because of that influence, in this life, cracks that spawned magical beasts were gradually appearing throughout the world. Although he was doing everything he could to stop it, he still needed Litra's help. The two began arguing in low voices, and Litra even muttered that maybe it would be better to let the world be destroyed. Not quickly said that if she could absorb those cracks, part of her power could recover. At the very least, for a short time, she would no longer have to worry about lacking stamina. Not also offered a holy sword, one that could change according to its owner's will. But because of the effects of time reversal, it would disappear after 30 minutes. Peruse stepped forward and took the sword. It turned into the shape of a demonic sword instead. Litra was speechless. Wasn't it supposed to be a holy sword? Still, as long as Peruse liked it, that was fine. Nickel, standing to the side, was startled. From his point of view, the two of them had suddenly appeared and then suddenly vanished. But there was no time to explain, because the monsters had arrived. Nickel really wanted to resign, but with the bonus the Duke had promised, he could keep working. The magical beast below would be left to him. Peruse and Litra would deal with the ones above. Mikkel always carried protective tools with him. Peruse explained that he also carried weapons. He just usually did not bring them, because he could solve things barehanded. He wanted to show a cool side of himself in front of the one he loved. Even so, being able to chat with Litra in a situation like this already made him impressive enough. That made Litra want to show off her own power too. As she spoke, a dazzling light descended. The magical beasts visibly began shrinking. Litra suddenly looked troubled. She had forgotten to tell God not to let the high priest interfere in what they were doing. But in the end, she could only handle it herself. First of all, if she wanted to stabilize and make use of the power obtained from repairing the crack, she would need at least another day or two. So for now, they should rest at a famous top-class hotel nearby. They appeared at the hotel covered in blood, and the scene was printed in newspapers and delivered all over the place. The man who saw it got an immediate headache. After reading the paper, the nobles all felt how terrifying they were. Those who had witnessed the scene in person were even more deeply shaken. No one knew what Litra looked like. They only knew that her aura was like that of a devil. Monica read the newspaper as well. The crown prince teased her with a smile. The center of attention used to be his fiancée. Now it had changed, and no one knew what he thought of it. In this way, the high priest's claim that Litra needed help was shattered. Instead, he became someone everyone disliked. And so, even if they were forced a divorce, the path to remarriage would also be blocked. Monica privately thought this move was truly ruthless. The eldest prince was happy to see it happen. There was no need to keep entangling himself with them. Monica, however, was afraid she would still have dealings with them, since Litra's hair ornament was still at her house. She just did not know what kind of image Litra would present the next time they met. Carta came rushing to the west, wanting to celebrate them. Everything in the plan was going smoothly. On the last page of the newspaper was news of a new investment craze sweeping high society. Rumor had it that some nobles were secretly expanding their businesses. Litra smiled. It was finally about to begin. Among the names on the list Litra had provided, some people thought this was their chance to make money. In truth, they were complete and utter suckers. And the exposure of her image had come at exactly the right time, completely burying that news. The groundwork had also become much easier. By using the momentum to turn investing into a trend, more people would pour money in, and it would be less likely to attract suspicion. Then they could make money without anyone noticing. The Duke calmly read the newspaper at the side, uninterested in their topic. Compared to the first time Carta had met him, the Duke was much more composed now because he knew his wife would never betray him. Litra was overjoyed to hear that. He had finally become more confident. Carta felt like he had been force-fed a whole mouthful of lovey-dovey sweetness. Then he suddenly thought of something and asked whether Lord and Lady Miltro had seen such news. Wouldn't that be a problem? Of course it was a huge problem, and the newspaper had even been sent over by the high priest. After all, his attempt to entrust the matter to the crown prince had failed, and that crown prince had made no move either. If things continued like this, Lady Litra's reputation would be ruined. He had to change the situation while there was still time and seek help from Baron and Baroness Miltro. But what he did not know was that Baron and Baroness Miltro had already met the Duke, and they did not oppose their relationship at all. The High Priest was still thinking of persuading them with reason. He planned to use the privileges of his position to help Litra clear away the stain on her name. Baron Miltro fell into distress. Realistically speaking, the High Priest's words were correct. Although he did not know why the man was treating Litra so well, for a humble family like the Miltros, this really was a ray of hope and an opportunity. But his daughter was also so happy with the Duke. So the Baron made his final decision. They would not interfere with that child's choice. The high priest had not expected to be rejected. After all, a humble family should not have refused his proposal. Perhaps Litra really was happy, but he still could not accept Litra being humiliated by the world. Unexpectedly, the moment he reached the door, he ran into Litra. Her attitude was extremely cold. The high priest had presumptuously tried to break her and the Duke apart. That was disgusting. Judging from his expression, things had not gone well at all. But the high priest still had not realized his mistake. Ever since birth, he had possessed some kind of connection with the divine. Although he could not hear the gods every time, he could sense them. Litra deserved someone better. So why was she so determined to stay by the Duke's side? While he was still talking, the Duke pulled something out and the two of them started playing cards beside him. The Duke sighed. What this man was saying was truly too boring. He had not expected the high priest to suddenly raise his voice and tell him that if he really cherished Litra, he should know his place and leave of his own accord. That was far too much. Litra immediately stood up, yet the Duke was not angry. He only said that he had once thought that way countless times, but his wife had rejected it every time. Their own problems would be settled by themselves. The one who should step aside was the man standing in front of them. Litra looked at the high priest displeased. What Astrum had done had gone far beyond what was acceptable. Frankly, even dying in atonement would not seem excessive. As she said that, she stepped forward and severed the connection between him and Not. Since he wanted to deprive others of what they loved most, he should first taste the feeling of loss himself. A flash of light soon passed. She was still being rather lenient. Once he reflected properly, that connection would be restored, even if it exhausted all of her energy, and until the next crack appeared, she would have to drag around this listless body. She did not regret it. The Duke only wanted to say one thing to the high priest. If he truly wanted to save someone, then he should first speak with that person. On the way back, the Duke reflected on himself as well. In their relationship, Litra had clearly spent more time and effort, while he had always been timid. From now on, he needed to become more straightforward and justified in loving her. Litra smiled. What she wanted more was for the Duke to do such things for his own sake and value himself more. Peruse still needed a little more guidance from his wife. Later, while they were nearly back in the carriage, Priest Honore personally came running over to apologize. He had never imagined the high priest would go that far. The Duke raised a hand to show he did not mind. In fact, he was feeling much better now. Litra said helplessly that the high priest would only look back after he had hit a wall. They would talk again next time. When they returned to the north, the familiar cold rushed to greet them. And yet this place was more comfortable than anywhere else in the world. The entire interior style of the house had been changed. The bed had been remade with heating materials built into it. That way, even without borrowing the Duke's body heat, they could sleep separately now. Hearing that, the Duke looked heartbroken. He did not want to sleep apart from his wife. Of course, Litra agreed. She had only been teasing him on purpose. But Peruse's expression was so adorable. He had even learned to take the initiative and cling tightly. It seemed she would have to be more careful in the future. Just then, a guard came to report. The new office had already been tidied up, and then he handed the key to Litra. The Duke had specially decorated an office for her so that she would have a place to work. Litra wanted to take a look. She discovered it was not merely large, it was enormous. Back when she had been emperor, she had always felt that too much office space was burdensome. The Duke felt a little guilty for not asking her opinion during the renovation. Litra proposed that as long as someone stayed with her, it would be fine, and that person was standing right in front of her. As they walked into the room, the Duke thought of something. There was a regular meeting for the Chevalier territory. Because the terrain in the north was so perilous, the retainers of the Chevalier Ducal House each guarded their own region. Every few months, they formally gathered together for a retainers' council to discuss necessary proposals. Each retainer had their own duties and a high degree of loyalty to the family. For a gathering meant to strengthen unity, it was actually considered rather approachable. The Duke was a little shocked. In his previous life, had he really told her all of that? It seemed that in that life, he had tried every means possible just to talk to Litra. Had they truly maintained a friendship for 5 whole years like that? Though it was not entirely meaningless. In any case, she could attend if she liked. Naturally, the Duke wanted Litra to take part even more. He wanted to show off just how amazing his wife was. Litra hesitated. It seemed she would have to postpone her appointment with Monica by 2 weeks. This time, she was definitely going to attend. Soon, the retainers' meeting arrived. Everyone was discussing the Duke's wife from the rumors. As the person from those rumors was about to arrive, everyone was very excited. The doors slowly opened. Litra showed a proper smile and greeted everyone. Everyone was instantly stunned. The Duchess did not seem quite like the rumors. The Duke stood at the front and announced the start of the meeting. Recently, the number of magical beasts had been gradually increasing. Everyone wanted to raise the budget, so the Duke turned and asked his wife's opinion. Litra thought for a moment. If there was anything left over after use, it could be converted into emergency funds. The way some people began whispering to each other caused dissatisfaction among others. The Duke, however, was straightforward. If they did not want to watch, they could leave. Litra felt deeply envious when she saw that. When she had been emperor, she had never enjoyed that kind of authority. During the break, the Duke spoke about when he had first taken the ducal seat. That experience had been unbearably heavy. Faced with so much pressure, it was fortunate that the retainers had held fast to their loyalty. Only then had he been able to secure his position. To the Duke, they were like family. There would naturally be too much emotional distance otherwise. Litra fell into thought. Given the Duke's personality, when faced with such circumstances, he would only work harder, even if he had to fight alone. But now the Duke had her. The meeting continued. Watching how affectionate the two were, everyone was full of emotion. At least now, they did not need to worry about the Chevalier family having no heir. The two of them were shocked to hear that. They had never once thought about that issue. Litra had never imagined marrying a noble who cared so much about continuing the bloodline. As for the matter of children, the Duke looked even more shaken than she was. Litra steadied her emotions and said they were still discussing it. There was no need to rush the matter of heirs. For now, what mattered most was paying attention to what was happening with the imperial family. That ended the topic. The retainers were about to leave. A meeting that should have lasted 2 or 3 days ended quickly, because everyone ran off so as not to interfere with the couple's affection. Litra also let out a sigh of relief. Thankfully, they had gone. Otherwise, she did not know how to answer any more questions about heirs. That night, Litra asked the Duke what he thought about having children. The Duke said he had never thought that far ahead either. He only hoped Litra would not feel pressured. Litra considered it for a moment and felt that they really should think about it. Along the way, for a very long time, she had only cared about the problems right in front of her. But the question of children was something they would inevitably face later. Even so, she had already lived through 3 lives and had never once given birth. Having a child in this life would not be bad either. The Duke was stunned. With him, Litra was puzzled. Wasn't her husband the Duke? If not with him, then with whom? If that happened, their relationship could deepen even further in the future. Thinking of that, she could not help blushing. After all, there was still another step involved in having children. At once, neither of them dared look at the other. The distance between them kept growing wider and wider. At this rate, that matter was still a long way off. Maybe they could just take it slowly. As long as the two of them were together, that was enough. Everything else was unimportant. Even though they had said such things, that night the two still slept together in the same bed. When morning came, Litra received a letter from Monica. Today was the day she would come to visit. The Duke said that everything had already been prepared. They only needed to change clothes. The matching outfits they had worn last time. This time would be the same. Monica soon arrived at the gate. Up to this point, among the nobles who had visited this Duke's castle, most had either been injured by the Duke or carried out after fainting. But she was visiting as a guest of the Duchess of Chevalier, so there should not be any problem. As the castle gates slowly opened, a remarkably warm scene appeared before her. Monica froze on the spot. The Duke should have been like that all along, but why had he become someone entirely different now? She had imagined the visit would be one way. In reality, though, it felt more like being invited into a fairy tale. Topaz stood behind her. Because of the family's discrimination, everyone else had been hurt and could not come, so only he had accompanied her. The Duke awkwardly apologized, since he was the one who had beaten them. Monica was somewhat surprised. The Duke was actually so kind. The man of the rumors had not been like this at all. Nominally, he was still of the imperial bloodline. Though his appearance looked fierce, if he treated people as warmly as this, he should be able to win over many nobles. It reminded her of what Litra had once said, set aside prejudice, and perhaps you would see more. So she gathered her courage and asked the Duke whether his savage behavior had been meant to distance himself from imperial power. The Duke felt some admiration. Monica's intelligence let her see the essence of things at a glance. Previously, Litra had used the same method as well. The power of prejudice was strong. Even if Monica revealed it, no one would believe her. The Duke added that for a long time, the nobles had despised him as a beast. Saying such things aloud would only deepen their prejudice. Monica did not understand. She was still the Crown Prince's fiancée in name and the Duke's political enemy. Why would he not hide it from her? The two of them showed troubled expressions. If they directly spoke of a previous life, Monica probably would not believe it. So Litra said that it was simply intuition. Monica was startled, suspecting that Litra already knew she had betrayed the Crown Prince. The enemy of her enemy was her friend. Monica wanted to know their plan. Litra and the others froze. How had the conversation gotten here? She had thought they would first become closer. Still, perhaps speeding up the process was fine too. Monica directly laid her cards on the table and had Topaz remove his mask. She wanted this child to become the next emperor. If the plan worked, she would make those who harassed the Chevalier family disappear. Topaz, meanwhile, felt that laying everything out early was not bad either. He had long wanted to grow closer to the Duke. Since childhood, Topaz had yearned for family, but his father had wanted him to disappear. Fortunately, in his darkest moment, he had met my lady. To survive, he could only defeat his half-brother, Crown Prince Abido. In truth, among the imperial relatives he could feel close to, there was only Duke Chevalier. The Duke understood at once. That was probably why Topaz had come to him for sword training. Filled with anticipation, Topaz wanted to call the Duke Big Brother. Suddenly, the room fell silent. Everyone stood there stunned. Judging by the family register, it did not seem like a wrong form of address. The only thing the two of them had in common was their eyes. Red eyes were a trait shared by those who carried royal blood. The Duke asked if there was no other title he could use. He had no brothers and did not know how to treat Topaz. After thinking it over, he still accepted the address. Litra smugly asked how it felt. Monica had originally worried the Duke might dislike it. It seemed she had worried for nothing. Since that was the case, they might as well let the two spend time together properly. Monica called Litra to go for a walk with her. Litra understood what she meant at once. Playfully, she told the Duke and his younger brother to get along well. Then she left the two of them where they were. The two women walked out of the castle. Litra also hoped they could become closer because the Duke's personal relationships were too limited. Everyone around him was a subordinate. He had no real friends. Having only her was not enough. After all, no matter how much two people cherished each other, they would still have disagreements. A healthy relationship needed multiple bonds, friends, family, all of it. Hearing that, Monica could not help marveling. It seemed Litra truly cherished the Duke. After all, in noble society, most marriages were political. It was hard to find someone who worried so deeply about their partner. The two of them, however, were like old acquaintances who had not seen each other in a long time. It had probably been at least 5 years to form feelings this deep. She wanted to learn that too. Litra stepped closer, saying that she also wanted to become friends with Monica. It felt like it would be wonderful. Monica thought about it. Well, now that they were allies, perhaps enjoying the glory of being a friend bond with the Duchess was not bad either. Litra smiled, thinking that this was really great. On the other side, the two men were still very stiff with each other. Even after all this time, nothing had improved. It seemed they would need some outside help. So Litra started pouring them drinks. Who would have guessed that Litra herself would get drunk first? Monica also got completely drunk. In the end, it became the two of them drunkenly making a scene and being carried away. Because of that, Topaz and the Duke instantly built up a kind of brotherly camaraderie. When Monica sobered up, she felt as if she had gone mad. She could hardly believe that the person who had made a drunken fool of herself had been her. She was even wearing Litra's clothes. Having a friend really did not feel bad. She hid her emotions behind a fan, but she would never drink with Litra again. Not only did it give her a headache, it had made her embarrass herself too. Unexpectedly, the moment she stepped out the door, she found Topaz squatting on the ground. Although the Duke had arranged 2 rooms for them, Topaz felt that, as a guard, it was his duty to protect Milady. Monica felt a little shy as she walked ahead, and Topaz accompanied her on a stroll. Monica asked what he thought of this place and whether he wanted to stay. After all, if he stayed here, he would no longer be controlled. She did not want to control Topaz's life too much. At that moment, Topaz removed his eye patch and, using his true name, swore that he would repay Milady for saving his life. Even if it cost him his life, he did not want to leave. Monica sighed. This little brat, still wet behind the ears, was putting on such airs. It was infuriating. He would only get one chance. Unlike the Duchess, she was selfish. Once a gem fell into her hands, she would never let go again. Topaz listened to the pounding of his own heart. This was what he had always hoped for. As for Litra, she simply refused to sleep, saying she was afraid that if she closed her eyes, she would not be able to see the Duke anymore. In truth, she had woken up a long time ago. She was just teasing the Duke. Peruse was willing to play along with her, and he was very happy to see his wife's flustered expression. It was quite amusing. Lying in bed together, Litra asked the Duke how it felt to have an extra younger brother. Peruse sighed softly. In truth, when he was little, because he had wanted a younger brother, he had even asked his parents for one. Now that it had come true, he was a little flustered, but still very happy. Ever since Litra came into his life, everything had been moving in a better direction. The next day, when they reached the gate, they still had to pretend their relationship was poor. Important communications were best kept from being traced, but this was not a long-term solution. If only there was something that could serve as a bridge. After thinking for a moment, the Duke suggested going through Topaz's swordsmanship instructor. He could introduce them to an acquaintance, Baroness Miltro. After returning, Monica wrote a letter to Litra. After spending a whole day at the Duke's residence, even her father had been terribly worried. But fortunately, she had not been harshly scolded. High society was deeply concerned. In just one morning, she had become the tragic heroine of a popular romance novel. After reading the letter, Litra felt rather conflicted. The vicious second female lead and the heroine had somehow switched roles. As for Topaz, ever since taking lessons from Baroness Miltro, he had looked radiant. It seemed Mother was doing quite well. Father, however, still had not adapted to the situation. In order to hire Mother as a lecturer, Marquis Tekka had produced a reason that everyone could use, convincing the whole group. Thus, rumors began to spread that the businesses operated in this way might undergo major changes. Making deals with that beast was no easy matter, but dealing with the approachable Miltro couple was possible. And because of that, everyone rushed to get ahead. They began contacting Baron and Baroness Miltro one after another. Father was nearly worked to death, but in the letters he sent, alongside gratitude, there was criticism too, telling her not to bully his daughter. Litra was speechless. Why was Father still fixated on that rumor? She wanted to write back telling him not to bully the Duke either. Before she could put pen to paper, Peruse stopped her. He actually liked being scolded like family. The atmosphere began to warm. Suddenly, the Duke changed the subject and said there were still many things they had to hurry and do afterward. Litra was puzzled. Was he deliberately avoiding the mood for a kiss? The Duke said he was afraid he would not be able to control himself. Litra was surprised. Although they had discussed this topic before, it had always been brushed aside in the end. She needed to start preparing herself mentally little by little. After all, she had already said she wanted his child. So she stepped forward and cupped the Duke's face. She said that if he lost control, that would be fine too. The Duke said in shock that he could not do that. Litra's expression changed. Could it be that the Duke simply did not want to take their relationship any further, and that was why he was saying this? The Duke hugged her and said it had nothing to do with impulse. His heart simply was not ready yet. It was actually a more proactive reason than she had expected. That reassured her. She had thought the Duke did not want to go any further with her, and that was why he had been acting that way. Maybe they could start by trying to bathe together. The clothes were made of a material that would not turn see-through even when soaked, so even if someone shouted for a retreat, they could relax. This would be their first bath together. She had even prepared a high-grade bath additive. The two slowly stepped into the bath.